In every corner of the world, from glittering cities to forgotten villages, there exists a silent promise that sustains civilization, a promise so fundamental we rarely question it. It is the idea that the government is our guardian, our compass, the steady hand that guides the nation through storms. Governments are meant to protect, to guide, to serve. But this narrative is, at best, incomplete, and, at worst, a dangerous lie. History, that relentless chronicler of truth, shows us a darker side. A side not learned in official textbooks. A side where the line between protector and predator fades. Where the greatest threat to your financial security comes not from anonymous hackers or masked thieves, but from within the institutional walls. Think about it. In crucial moments when the economy staggered, when war loomed, or when the very social structure seemed to collapse, there were times when entire nations awoke. They awoke to discover a chilling and undeniable truth. They had lost everything, not to invading armies, not to a sudden, unpredictable market crash. No, the theft was more insidious, more calculated. It was a surgical act of spoilage carried out by those who held the keys to their vaults, their records, their futures. It was the theft perpetrated by their own leaders, from the Great Depression in America to hyperinflationary shocks in South America, from the confiscation of gold during wartime to the total seizure of bank savings in collapsing countries. The pattern is frighteningly consistent. The method is always the same. Fear is the catalyst. The law is the tool. The justification is always the greater good of the nation. But what is the true cost of the greater good? Who pays the price when trust is betrayed and the state, which swore to protect you, decides that what is yours is theirs? This is not a story of trivial conspiracy. It is a cold, factual examination of institutionalized economic betrayal. Hold your breath, brace yourself, because this is the story of the time the government stole from its citizens. And, most importantly, the lessons we need to learn before it happens again. Case 1. The betrayed trust. Every nation, whether a young democracy or an empire, rests upon and surprisingly fragile foundation, trust. It is an everyday act of faith. When you leave your home, you expect the police to protect you, not to rob you. When you receive your salary, you trust that the money held in the bank will be there tomorrow. And, crucially, when you pay your taxes, you believe the state will use those funds for the common good, to build roads, to heal the sick, to defend the borders. This is the social contract, the invisible bedrock that holds everything together. We, the citizens, voluntarily surrender the majority of what we own to the state, our money, our personal data, the fruit of our labor and our lives. We do this under the firm conviction that the state, the legal Leviathan, will not only protect these assets, but will also amplify their value through stability and order. But this pact has a fatal flaw. The state holds the monopoly on legal force. It is the only entity that can, without facing immediate resistance, transform the word protection into the word control, and control into confiscation. History is replete with examples of this tipping point. This isn't about low-level corruption, the bribing of a minor official. We are talking about strategic deviations at the very top, where the perceived need of the state overrides all individual rights. Look at 1930s America. The Great Depression was not just an economic collapse, it was a collapse of trust. And the government, seeing gold being hoarded by citizens as an obstacle to recovery, invoked the Trading with the Enemy Act to issue Executive Order 6000 102. This order did the unthinkable. It made it illegal for U.S. citizens to own gold bullion or coins, requiring it to be sold to the Federal Reserve at a fixed, below-market price. It was, essentially, forced confiscation, disguised as a monetary stabilization measure. Citizens handed over their gold, not to a thief, but to their own government. What was a personal treasure, an ancestral store of value, was suddenly declared a public threat. The precedent was set. The state can, if it invokes the correct crisis and the correct law, redefine what belongs to you. And that pattern has been repeated on an even more devastating scale in other geographies and other times. Recall the 1994, in some cases, simply appropriated the bank savings of their citizens. People who had worked their whole lives, saved for retirement, put money aside for their children's education, saw their accounts locked by an overnight decree. The money was still there on the balance sheet, of course, but the access was gone. The asset had turned into digital smoke. This is the moment of maximum betrayal. When the government, the final arbiter of law and order, uses the very law to become the greatest thief of all. It is a theft that requires no break-in, no physical violence. It requires only a signature, an official stamp, and the cold invocation of the word compulsory. There is nowhere to run, for the thief is installed at the top of the entire system. The money was not lost. It was taken. What this chapter teaches us is that the real vulnerability lies not in the strength of criminals, but in the legal omnipotence of the state. When trust is broken, the citizen loses not only their assets but their power of choice, their autonomy. The state transforms its role from guardian of property to de facto owner of everything within its borders. It is the subtle but devastating transition from trust to control. Case 2. The confiscation when the state takes what is yours. Following the breakdown of trust, the state moves into the operational phase, confiscation, in times of genuine or manufactured crisis. Desperate or malevolent governments consistently choose the path of least resistance, yet the most morally destructive, taking directly from their own people. This is not about transparent tax increases. This is about seizure, the nullification of private property by decree. This is the essence of institutional theft. The methods vary, but the result is always the same. First, the freezing of bank accounts. It is the modern equivalent of locking the barn door. The money remains visible on the screen, but it becomes inaccessible. Overnight, millions of families lose the liquidity to buy food, pay rent, or manage a medical emergency. The freeze is not just an economic measure. It is a total paralysis of the citizen's life, a form of coercive control that rapidly breaks the will of a population. It is the declaration that, in practice, your money is not yours, but a line of credit that the state can revoke at any moment. Then, there is the direct confiscation of physical and valuable assets. The most notorious example is gold, as we saw in America. But in other jurisdictions, the target might be debt securities, stocks, or even property. The government issues an order backed by criminal sanctions, demanding the surrender of these assets in exchange for paltry compensation or, worse, in exchange for rapidly devalued currency. It is the forced exchange of a real asset for paper that quickly disintegrates. The metal that symbolizes solidity is replaced by empty promises. Another insidious form of confiscation is forced devaluation, or the appropriation of wages and savings through mandatory exchange rates. In a scenario of hyperinflation or large bank bail-ins, the government can, by decree, impose an artificially low exchange rate to convert foreign currencies or large deposits. An individual may have saved the equivalent of $100,000. But the government declares that for withdrawal or conversion purposes. And there is always the justification, the moral smokescreen. In every case of mass confiscation, the official narrative is identical. This is for the good of the nation. It is a temporary measure to stabilize the economy. Or preventing an even greater collapse. Leaders wrap themselves in the mantle of patriotism and collective sacrifice, demanding that the burden fall on the shoulders of those who worked and saved. But the truth is that the real price, the catastrophic and irrevocable loss of wealth and future, almost always falls upon middle-class families and individuals who have the least capacity to influence or escape the system. The elites, those who create the decrees, almost always have ways to protect themselves: offshore investments, privileged access to information, insider trading. It is the life savings of ordinary citizens that evaporate overnight. Pensions disappear. Retirement plans are destroyed. Savings that took decades to build are consumed in a matter of hours by the institutional machine. Confiscation is the ultimate proof that, to the state in crisis, the people are not its boss. They are its emergency reserve that can be plundered at any moment, instead of seeking difficult solutions cutting spending, managing debt responsibly, or reforming the system. Some governments choose the brutal shortcut. They choose seizure, transforming protection into expropriation. And the justification, it is a convenient lie. The truth is that institutional confiscation does not stabilize. It merely destroys the last thing that holds an economy together: the belief in private property. Case 3. The collapse. The consequences of institutional theft. After the financial violence of confiscation, the nation enters unknown territory. The question is no longer who took what, but rather, what happens to a country? When its own government becomes the thief, the answer is immediate and brutal. Trust, that fragile foundation we spoke of, is not merely shaken. It is annihilated. And without trust, the economic system, the social fabric of everything disintegrates. The first is a prowess no on spot. Why? Because if the state can, by decree, nullify your savings or freeze your assets, what is the incentive to work and save? Capital retreats under the mattress into informal markets, into assets the government cannot control if any capital remains at all. This government-induced fear is a more potent poison than any natural recession. Businesses, without credit and without consumption, are forced to close their doors in a cascade, leading to massive unemployment and the collapse of production. The second impact is currency disintegration. When the government steals, it is usually attempting to plug budgetary holes created by mismanagement or excessive debt. Confiscation is often accompanied by the rampant printing of money to compensate for what was taken or to pay internal debts. The result is runaway inflation. The currency plummets. The money remaining in the hands of citizens loses value with every passing hour. We see images of people carrying stacks of banknotes just to buy a loaf of bread. It is the visual proof that the state has destroyed the main instrument of exchange and value measurement. But the deepest consequences are human and generational. The savings that disintegrate are not just numbers. They are the grandparents' retirement. They are The children's university tuition. They are the plans for owning a home. When a family loses everything overnight, the loss is structural. A wave of sudden poverty is generated, a social stress that leads to increased crime, political instability, and often mass migration. Families do not just lose wealth. They lose hope in the future within their own country. This loss of confidence is, perhaps, the most lasting damage. Institutional theft teaches a bitter lesson to an entire generation. Your government is not trustworthy. This lesson is etched into the economic DNA of the country. Even decades after the event, people remain averse to investing in banks, trusting public bonds, or declaring wealth. An economy of fear and concealment is created, where people prefer the inefficiency of cash under the mattress rather than risking exposure to the state's big brother. When people realize that their savings are not secure, that the rules can change at any moment by decree, that the referee is playing for the other side, productivity drops, innovation stagnates, and the nation's potential is suffocated. No, one prospers in a cycle of fear and distrust. Confiscation is not an endpoint. It is a catalyst for long-term decay, a self-inflicted wound that bleeds a country's economic vitality for decades. This is the hidden cost of institutional theft, the generational damage of having trust irrevocably broken. This is the bitter legacy of confiscation. A country where money is devalued, investment is nil, and fear is the dominant currency. A place where the memory of the day the government stole is passed down from parent to child as a cautionary tale. A lesson that, sometimes, the most dangerous enemy lurks in your own seat of government. Case 4. The lessons warme always say. We have looked at the betrayal of trust and the ruinous consequences of confiscation. What is clear is that this is not an isolated aberration in history. The pattern is painfully clear and repeats across different countries, in different eras, and with different currencies. The common denominator is always the same: the inevitable collision between state power and the nature of money. Money is freedom. State power is control. And when these two clash, citizens invariably pay the price. History shows us that institutional confiscation thrives in environments of governmental desperation. When the state becomes insolvent, whether due to excessive spending, prolonged wars, or systemic corruption, it seeks the easiest solution: the money it can control. That urgency overrides the most basic moral and legal principles. From the seizure of accounts in Cyprus in 2013 as part of a bail-in, to the nationalization of foreign assets in dictatorships, the message is universal when governments become desperate. The first and most vulnerable reserve of wealth is that of their own citizens. But there is a crucial distinction we must make, and this is the most dangerous lesson of all. The institutional theft we speak of is not taxation. Taxation, however heavy, is a legislated, predictable, and public process. Confiscation, on the other hand, is the retroactive and unexpected appropriation of already existing assets outside the normal rules of taxation. It is not a tax on future income. It is the plundering of what was legitimately earned and saved in the past. It is the changing of the rules of the game after the final whistle, ensuring the state always wins, and herein lies the greatest danger. The most destructive theft is that which is done legally. A criminal's robbery is illegal and easily identifiable. Government confiscation, however, is dressed in legality. It is imposed by a decree, passed by a legislative chamber, or justified by an emergency act. A simple signature by a political leader on a piece of paper can take more than the most organized army or the most sophisticated criminal network ever could. The theft becomes systemic because it is sanctioned by the very system sworn to protect you. Consider the psychological force of this act. The criminal steals your goods. The government steals your legitimacy. By using the law as a weapon, the state not only takes your savings but also nullifies your ability to challenge the act. There is no recourse, for the decision has already been validated by the nation's highest court of power. This leads to a cold conclusion. A person's greatest weakness is their belief in the inviolability of private property within state borders. That inviolability is, in fact, a revocable permission, subject to the government's need or greed. History is a closed circuit of warnings. From the debasement of silver by Roman emperors to fund their wars, leading the collapse of the Darius, to modern violins that stolpositor's money, the pattern immutable. Where there is centralized power and control over money, there is the inescapable temptation to abuse it for political or fiscal ends. The final lesson is clear. Real security lies not in the state's promise, but in the diversification and decentralization of your assets. Because an asset the government cannot find or cannot legally control is an asset it cannot steal. The only defense against institutional confiscation is awareness and preparation. We must understand that the law is a tool that can be used for good or for evil, and that, in the hands of a desperate government, it becomes the most powerful weapon of theft in the world. History is unforgiving, and those who forget these lessons are condemned to live them again. We have reached the end of our dark journey. We have seen trust betrayed and economies dismantled by decree. The final lesson is not about the value of gold or the balance of a bank account. It is about something much deeper. When a government steals from its people, when it turns its legal authority into the ultimate weapon of expropriation, it does not just take money. It takes belief in the future. It destroys the stability of the present. And, above all, it annihilates hope in the next generation. Story after story, across different continents and centuries, a cold, immutable truth remains. Power is a double-edged force. It has the unparalleled capacity to protect, to build, and to create prosperity. But, if left unchecked, it also has the limitless potential to destroy, and to crush individual autonomy. The temptation to use centralized control over money as a shortcut to solve complex problems is a corrupting force that few governments can resist, especially in times of crisis. Fortunes vanish. Nations plunge into fear, and trust, once broken, is rarely fully recovered. Institutional confiscation leaves deep scars. It teaches that, to the state, you are not a sovereign citizen. You are a readily available financial resource. And, paradoxically, the greatest thief in history is the very one vested with the authority to keep you safe. It is a betrayal that echoes beyond economic charts, settling in the collective psychology of a nation as a lasting trauma. But there is one force that not even the most powerful government can steal: memory. The memory of confiscation serves as an eternal warning beacon. This is why these stories need to be told, so that we understand the fine line between governmental management and economic tyranny, so that we protect our assets from the only entity that can legally steal them, and so that we demand unwavering transparency and accountability from those who hold our destiny in their hands. Power may be blind, but our awareness is not, and our duty is to never forget. What about you? Do you believe this type of confiscation, this legal theft, can happen again in our modern world? Leave your opinion, your experiences, and your protection strategies in the comments below. The conversation about the security of your wealth is vital. If this analysis brought you a new perspective, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more investigations into hidden secrets of power and money.